So it is February, which means that it's time for me to tell you about the books I read in January. I read 7 books in January, which I think is a really good start to the year. That's a nice, quite sustainable number, I think. I listened to, I think, over half of those as audiobooks, so I don't have the physical copies to show you. Even still, we're going to talk about them. I have started trying to, tab my books and everything. I'm not at a point where I can write in my books because, not necessarily because I'm squeamish about them, but because I unhaul books quite regularly if I don't love them, and I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if it has a bunch of scribbles in it. So at the moment I'm just tabbing. I have some highlighting tape, which is quite cool, just because I want to engage maybe more critically with what I'm reading now that I'm starting to do these videos again. But now though, let's get into the books I read in January. A lot of these books I've read as part of various reading challenges. I'm part of 3 reading challenges for 2025. I did attempt to make a video about those reading challenges and the books I want to read in them, but the audio was so bad that I've just scrapped it. So instead, when I've read a book that is part of a reading challenge, I will just tell you. The first book I read this year, or this month as well, this month and this year, God, I'm bad at this today, is Hera by Jennifer Saint. I read Ariadne by Jennifer Saint 2 years ago now, and I really enjoyed it. I love me a good Greek retelling, and this is the second Jennifer Saint book I've read, and I'm very much enjoying her retellings. I think she has one other out called Electra, which I haven't read yet, but by the by, we're talking about Hera now. I gave this book 4 stars. I very much enjoyed it. This is very much of the angry female character trope, or female rage that is a big thing on TikTok and stuff. And I very much enjoyed that. I didn't know much about Hera as a goddess, which I think is almost assumed in this book as well. There are allusions to the fact that Hera is thought of as just the goddess of marriage, whereas this is saying, and she's so much more, and that is a very similar thing that happened in Ariadne, where in a lot of the stories, Ariadne is just the woman that helped Theseus escape the labyrinth, or Dionysus' wife, and these tell you their stories. And I enjoy the fact that Hera went from the Titanomachy through the Gigantomachy all the way to past the point where the Greek gods were particularly revered as much. It went through the rise and the fall of the Olympians, and I really enjoyed that because whilst as a child I was much more of a Norse mythology girl, I did like Greek mythology as well, so being able to pick out these different events as they were happening, being, oh, I know what that was, was very interesting. I find Jennifer Saint's writing style very accessible, not overly flowery, but all of her characterizations of all the different gods were very well done, and I really enjoyed it. Very nearly instantly failed the thing I told you I was going to do, which was when I read a book from one of my writing challenges, I would tell you what that was. And I nearly put this down without telling you. Hera was a fill for the Storygraph genre challenge, the 2025 genre challenge. So this is the fill for, this is the fill for historical fiction set outside of the UK, US, or Canada, because this is set in Greece. The second book I read in January, which I listened to as an audiobook, was All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. This was also a reading challenge fill. This was for the 2025 onboarding challenge on Storygraph, which is set up to help people figure out the app and stuff like that by making them do fills from different sections. And the fill this one is, let me get to my trusty Snoopy book, which has all of my different challenges from years gone by in it. Fill was a book published between 2010 and 2020 that fits the reader profile, my reader profile, but excludes my most read genre. My most read genre is LGBTQ plus books, so this was not that. I gave this book 2 stars. I did not enjoy it at all, really. However, it wasn't terribly written, which is why I didn't give it like a 1 star. This is one of those books that I think, because of the subject matter, it's almost like they're not allowed to rate it low, which I disagree with completely, because I read a lot of books that deal with this kind of subject matter that I really enjoyed, that I thought did it really well. This wasn't one of them. It could also be that this is young adult, and I think maybe I am now at the age where it's not connecting anymore. All the Young Places follows... I've already forgotten their names. So All the Bright Places follows the story of Theodore Finch and Violet Markey, who meet on the clock tower of their school when both of them are contemplating jumping off of it. And it then follows them becoming sort of like unlikely friends, and then it is also a love story. Here's the thing. Theodore Finch, as a character, and here's another thing, is that I felt like the mental illness diagnoses that Finch was kind of getting through the book, even... Okay, I'm finding it really hard to talk about this book because in the author's note at the end as well, Jennifer Niven spoke about how this was a very personal book for her because she knew someone who committed suicide, and therefore the themes in the story and everything are clearly very close to her, and that's like, and she claims to care a lot about mental illness and everything. However, the depictions of it in this book I found quite offensive. I found the character of Theodore Finch to be abrasive and pushy and just not a good... He is like... Oh god, I'm getting like angry talking about it. One of the good things I could say about this book is that it has taught me that I hate the manic pixie dream girl trope even when it is gender reversed. Because that's all Theodore Finch was like reading to me as, was like a manic pixie dream boy. And I just knew that if I met this person in real life, he would annoy the absolute hell out of me. Which made it hard to empathise with the things that he was going through. Like, I did, but also there were things that he then did that I was like, you should be slapped for that. He was so pushy with Violet, and he refused to take no for an answer in everything. He just like cajoled her into things. And that's it. Then moving on to Violet Markey as a character, I didn't feel like she was a character. There were points in time where she would state, because this was a dual POV, so you went from Theodore to Violet, and back again per chapter. When you got into like Violet's mind, she would say something like, "Oh my god, I'm so angry about this," but it was like, are you though? Because your tone hasn't changed, your actions haven't changed, nothing you've done has changed. You are literally a blank slate. There is nothing about you. So whilst I'm sad that you are being pushed by this man so much, I say man, they're teenagers, that you are being like pulled and pushed and cajoled into all of these things by this guy, but at the same time, you're not particularly putting up much of a fight because you're not a character. And yes, there are better books that... I don't know why I'm doing like this pose. There are better books that talk about this topic, and it left me feeling frustrated the entire time I was reading it. So yes, 2 stars for that. Would not recommend. The third book I read, which I do actually have a physical copy of, but I've lent it to a friend because it was the pick for my horror book club that I'm a part of, and it was my pick. So I had a copy of it, and my friend didn't, so once I finished it, I gave it to her, and she still has it. Was The Plotters by Eunsu Kim. This, I gave 3 stars? Yes, I gave it 3 stars. This wasn't what I thought it was going to be, like, at all. I thought this was going to be more, like, brutal and dark than it was, because it was sort of... That's not necessarily a bad thing, either. This was sort of sold to me as a dark, gritty Korean like mafia thriller, and it wasn't. So this follows the story of Ressing. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Who is an assassin who was raised by a man called Old Raccoon, who basically runs a library which is actually a front for like the biggest assassination sort of guild, I guess, in South Korea. And so he raised Resseng to also be an assassin. And then one day Resseng allows a woman who he has been, paid to go and kill. He allows her to go out on her own terms, and like after that, he has basically a target on his back. So you'd think that the whole thing was about him trying to escape. It would be like a fast-paced thriller escaping this, but it's not. It was like a really philosophical book that kept skipping timelines back to like before this event, things that Ressing did in his past, and then it sped up really fast in the last like 2 chapters where it suddenly took on the tone that I thought it was going to. And I guess I gave it a 3 stars because I don't have an awful lot to say about it. It was good, but not what I expected. Therefore, I was a bit thrown off the entire time I was reading it. It was well written to an extent. However, books in translation, I always give leeway to books in translation because you can never tell if it's the translation itself that isn't like great or whether that was actually just the way it was written anyway. So sometimes the translation was a bit odd, but yeah, it was fine. Okay, the next book I read was also an audiobook, and this was also a fill for the onboarding challenge. This was the fill for read a book chosen by the random pick generator found in Up Next Suggestions. And that was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This was a thriller. It was a thriller mystery. I gave this 4 stars, mostly because this is one of those thrillers that has like a twist at the end. And when I then got to the twist, I instantly was like, right, I want to reread this now, knowing that. And for a thriller to be able to do that is quite rare. I find with a lot of thrillers that have a twist, once you've read it and you know the twist, even if you really enjoyed it, you'll not particularly have much of an interest to read it again because you're like, oh, well, I know how it ends now. Whereas this one, I want to get a physical copy so that I can go through it with sticky tabs and all of that stuff to see all of the things that are foreshadowing this twist, because as soon as it happened, my brain was going, oh, that explains like that bit and that bit. But I want to like sit down and read it with the ending in mind now. So I really enjoyed it. It's actually been on my TBR for quite a while. I should probably then tell you what it's about. So We Were Liars follows a very rich family, like 1% American rich, who every summer go to their private island for the entirety of the summer and have, a nice summer there. And it follows the like teenage generation of this family. So this predominantly follows, I believe her name is Katie, like I said, I forget names, like almost as soon as I read them, who is one of these sort of like the 4 teenagers. You have 3 cousins and then someone who, he was the nephew of one of the cousins' stepfather. So he's not blood related. Anyway, they've grown up together on this island. You have Katie, who's sort of like the main character. You have Miriam, John, and Gat, who is the nephew of the stepfather. And the book starts a year after a tragic event happened, where Katie was found on a place that they call the Little Beach by herself, in the ocean swimming. She has no memory of it. She was quite badly injured, and now 2 years later, because she had a year away from the summer house while she was dealing with these like chronic migraines and trying to get a bit better, she's returning to the island and trying to unravel what the hell happened that summer, because she can't remember it. She has amnesia and she also gets chronic migraines and everything like that. And she's trying to get people to tell her what happened, but they're saying that the doctor says she needs to, remember it by herself. So she's trying to piece things together whilst also trying to fix friendships and things that had happened, because she knows something has gone wrong. Her and Gat, in the summer that she got injured, were having a bit of like a whirlwind romance, and she wants to know why he never contacted her while she was like getting better, and is he like done with her, and can they start again and stuff like that. So whilst this is one of those things where none of the characters are particularly good as people, and that can be done either really well, as in the case of The Secret History, or in a way that makes you hate literally everyone, as in the case in All the Bright Places. And this one, I think, was more towards The Secret History for me, in that the fact that these people were bad people didn't particularly bother me all that much. I was just along for the ride. It was enjoyable storytelling. I was hooked on the mystery for ages, trying to like figure it out myself. And I just always am under the assumption that rich people are bad people anyway. So it didn't shock me when they did bad things. But yes, that was a 4-star. And my next read was again for the Storygraph onboarding challenge. You can probably tell that I'm trying to get one of these challenges finished before like fully diving into the others, because this only has 5 prompts, whereas the other ones have like 10. This is my first non-fiction of the year, and it was to read a book from my least read genre, and my least read genre was a travel book, which did not surprise me, but gave me an excuse to finally read a book that I picked up in New Zealand when I went there a couple of years ago and haven't touched yet. So the book I read was The Lord of the Rings Location Guidebook, the extended edition. This is by Ian Brody. What did I give it? I think I gave it a 4. This was another 4-star because I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's hard to talk about non-fiction books the way I would talk about fiction books. I know I was going to love it going into it because I love Lord of the Rings, I love the book series, I love the movies, and I bought this at Hobbiton in New Zealand. So what I was really enjoying, and I'm actually just open to this, was the fact that when we were there, other than going to see Hobbiton, we also did a Lord of the Rings like day tour when we were down in Queenstown. And so going through all of these locations, I was able to, for example, this beautiful photo here, I flipped to that page and went, I've been there, I've seen that, I've been there. So it works, I think, if you were wanting to do a Lord of the Rings tour through New Zealand. This is very good because it goes from North Island to South Island, it takes you through different towns and everything. It has, just absolutely gorgeous photos. But for some of the more remote locations, it, 1, tells you how to get there, and 2, I'm trying to find one of the more remote ones. It gives you GPS locations so that you can physically get to the site. And as well as telling you stories of the set when they were there, how they built things, there are also little excerpts of history of Middle-earth itself. So as a Lord of the Rings nerd, I was going to love this anyway, and I really did. The 6th book I read in January, and another audiobook I listened to, was a pick for my 2025 Read the World Challenge. This was a pick from Malaysia, and it was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I wanted to read this for ages because Crazy Rich Asians, the movie, is one of my comfort films. I watch it so often. I gave this a 3 stars, and I think that's because one of those rare occasions where I thought the movie was better. I preferred the movie. And maybe it's because Crazy Rich Asians is the first in the series, and maybe I'll like it more as I go in. I just preferred the characterizations of basically all of the characters in the film than I did in the book. But it was still a fun, light-hearted, rom-com romp, really. The story of Crazy Rich Asians is you follow Rachel Chu, who is dating a man named Nicholas Young, and he invites her to come with him to Singapore for his best friend's wedding, because he's going to be best man, and he wants her to finally meet all of his family. What she doesn't know, because he's never told her, which was a sticking point for me in both the movie and in the book, I have to say, is that his family is filthy, stinking rich, crazy rich, if you will. They are one of the richest families in Singapore. He's never told her this. She thinks he's because he's also a professor. She is a professor of economics. He is a professor of history. They both work at NYU, so she assumes he's same level as wealth as she is. And so he doesn't prepare her for any of this. They just fly to Singapore, and then she is thrust into the Viper's den of all these catty, bitchy women that want Nicholas for themselves because he's one, he's super hot, and two, he is one of the richest men in, Singapore. So he's like the big catch. And everyone's thinking that she's like a gold digger, despite the fact that she didn't know like at all, and all of this money and extravagance is kind of really pushing her off. So yeah, it's lighthearted, it's fun. I just preferred the characterizations in the movie. There were a lot more characters in the book, which obviously got amalgamated into the characters in the film. And I think, for example, my favourite character in Crazy Rich Asians, the movie, is Astrid. And in the book, she's quite different in a way that I didn't enjoy. She's a bit more of a wet paper towel, whereas Astrid in the movie is very self-assured and so cool. We got more of Ollie in the movie than we do in the book, because Ollie in the movie is an amalgamation of like 3 characters and stuff like that. So yeah, that's why it was only a 3, because I enjoyed it. And I think if I hadn't read the movie, if I hadn't watched the movie yet, I would have enjoyed it more. But all I was doing when I was listening to this was going, oh, well, I'm going to go home, I'm going to rewatch the movie. Which leads us on to the last book I read in January. I finished this January 31st, so I was like, I'm going to finish this because I only have 40 pages left. And I did. It's also a Read the World Challenge pick. This was for Mexico, and that was The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I always have to check because I always want to see like Maria Machado or something like that, but it's not. It's Moreno Garcia. I gave this a 3-star. It's another sort of romance. This is a magical realism romance, which I think, even though it says it on the back, I didn't. It kind of took me by surprise for some reason. I loved Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and didn't super love Gods of Jade and Shadows, also by the same author, and assumed that I didn't like that one as much because that was more young adult. This, did I already say I gave this a 3-star? Yeah. This one I was leaning closer to Mexican Gothic in that I was enjoying it. I love a Victorian like that kind of period romance type thing. That's what this was. It was, I think, I'm going to get into it, but this has 3 different POVs, and I think one of the things that pulled it down for me is that one of the POVs, every time we were in that woman's brain, I hated it. And it's another one of the things of like, I know she's a bad character and she's written as such, but oh my god, I don't want it. Please stop. She's awful. So I'll explain that probably, but the plot of The Beautiful Ones is we are following. I'm going to butcher all of these names. I'm sorry, because I'm fairly certain most of them are like French leaning, and I can't do a French accent. Nina Bellew. Anyway, Nina, it's her first season, which means it's her first time being like presented. She's out and about in the springtime. This is something that like aristocracy in that time period did, I think, all over the world. Really, you had the grand season where all of the famous balls were happening. So young women who were finally presented to the king or queen at the time could finally be out in public and start enjoying themselves and start looking for husbands and things. And this is Nina's first grand season. She is staying with her cousin Peyton and his wife Valerie. Valerie is the woman that I wanted to stab every time I was in her brain. Oh my god. Which I think is probably a good indication that Sylvia wrote a good antagonist, because Valerie is the antagonist. But every time I was like, oh my god, you bitch! Anyway, so Nina is not having a great time. She's a bit different, she's a bit unusual. She loves etymology, so she's really into bugs and things, and she also has the talent, which is telekinesis. And it's incredibly frowned upon, especially for women to have it, and especially for high-class women to have it. It's fine if you're like a low-born man who's using it to perform, like on stage, people go and watch telekinetic performances and stuff, but if a lady had it, that's bad. and Nina meets Hector Ovray, who is like the biggest telekinetic performer. She meets him at one of these balls, and she like falls almost instantly in love with him. But she asks him to become her friend, basically, and he agrees because her cousin is Valerie, and when he and Valerie were younger, they were engaged to be married. He was in love with her. She broke it off to marry a rich man, Gaten. And ever since then, Hector has. I mean, he's a very rich man now himself, but he's not one of the beautiful ones. The beautiful ones are basically old money. Hector is not old money, he's new money. So he decides, okay, I'm going to become friends with Nina. I'm going to court Nina so that I can get to Valerie. And Valerie is a shallow, conniving, evil witch whose only redeeming feature is that she's beautiful. Both one of the beautiful ones, and she's also just a stunning visage. And she allows Hector to court Nina because she likes the fact that she can toy with Hector whilst he's there. She knows why he's there. She knows he's there for her, and she likes that. She likes having that power over him and everything. And oh god, she's vile. And I know that's the whole point is that she's vile, but oh my god, the fact that we would be in her POV and it wasn't even trying to justify herself for things. She was just basically stating stuff as fact, as I am Valerie Varese. I am one of the beautiful ones. I deserve the world. You're not giving me the world, to her husband Gaten. You like your family. How dare you? I should be the only thing you think about. She was like a sociopath. Anyway, misunderstandings, all of that stuff. It is a romance. It does sort of get resolved. There was a duel in this. I wasn't expecting that. I kind of picked up in the last act. But yeah, I only gave it a 3. I think because Valerie annoyed me so much. But as I'm talking about it, I know that that's the point. There is also the fact that there are certain romantic tropes. One of the reasons I don't read romances that much is that there are certain tropes in romances that I don't understand. I don't get it. And it could be the fact that I'm Arrow Ace, so romance is always sort of lost on me. But there are certain things, such as finding out that the man you are in love with was only pretending to like you back because he wanted to get to your cousin or your cousin-in-law. That should be the end of it. Right? Thankfully, in this one, Hector did do a lot of redeeming of himself when all of this came to light and stuff. But still, there is a point in time where the final oh yay they get together is a little bit sour for me because of what has happened beforehand. I think this is why enemies to lovers doesn't work for me, except in things like Pride and Prejudice, where you find out that it is just a massive misunderstanding. Anyway. Yes, those were the books that I read in January. Usually I would hold them up, but I only have 3 physical ones with me, so that seems a bit pointless. Have you read any of the books that I read? Do you agree with my opinions on them? Do you disagree? Did you love All the Bright Places and hate Hera? I don't. Yeah, tell me about it in the comments. Just be respectful of everyone. As always, be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and I will see you in the next video.